Solomon J. Solomon was born in London in 1860. He comes from a talented family. His sister was also a painter. His precocious gift was quickly recognized and encouraged. Before proceeding to Paris, Mr. Solomon studied for some time at Heatherley School of Fine Art, an independent art school in London, the well-known school for specializing in portrait and figure painting, and before his student days were over, he worked a good deal in the galleries of Italy and Spain. But Mr. Solomon's art, like that of Mr. Sargent, is of course mainly the product of French training and influence. Solomon studied at various art schools, besides the Royal Academy schools, the Munich Academy, and École des Beaux-Arts, under Alexandre Cabanel. He exhibited his first works as early as 1881, exhibiting at the Royal Academy, the New Gallery, and the Society of British Artists. In 1886 he became one of the founding members of the New English Art Club. By 1896 he became an associate of the Royal Academy, with full membership following in 1906. Mr. Solomon's reputation as an artist was not made by portraits. His first important contribution to the Royal Academy, the subject being Cassandra, was hung in the exhibition of 1886, and in the next few years Mr. Solomon confirmed and strengthened the impression he had made as an imaginative painter by Samson and Delilah, then Niobe, and following The Judgment of Paris. These works would confirm his importance as a leading artist with a great deal of future success ahead of him. Since this period, however, Mr. Solomon had acquired equal fame as a painter of ladies' portraits. Mrs. Patrick Campbell, at Burlington House in 1893, first manifesting, perhaps, his full powers in this direction. In his student days, it would seem, he was always looked upon as a coming portrait painter. Solomon relates, "When I was at the Beaux-Arts in Paris, in the course of a conversation at afternoon tea in his house in Finchley Road, I used to amuse myself by painting fellow students during the luncheon interval and the model's rest. This, my first subject, was Prince Lucien Bonaparte, whose portrait I painted because it was on his introduction that I was admitted to Cabanel's studio. An amusing incident occurred, I remember, in connection with it. I had the whole figure complete except the hands. No further sitting for the time being was practicable, and so, with the daring of youth, I determined to do the hands from the reflection of my own in the mirror. Shortly afterward I went to see the Prince at his house. An old housekeeper, who had known him from childhood, was asked her opinion of the likeness. She replied that the whole portrait was very good, but les mains sont les mains d'un ouvrier. The hands are that of a workman. Now turning to the picture, Samson and Delilah, it must be considered a masterpiece that has all the powerful elements that can be manifested in a great work of art. It is genuine in feeling, dramatic in composition, and possesses all the technical know-how needed for such a work on a large scale. His drawing is sure, and the players are portrayed as if in a Shakespearean drama. It grabs the viewer with action and scale, to hold one as if you are a witness to the scene. Samson awakens. He has lost his great strength and pushes forward not knowing his strength has left him. Delilah is just as surprised not knowing if her ruse succeeded, all from a painter yet in his early 20s with the vigour of youth, to pull it off. The painting has remained on view at the Walker Art Gallery in Liverpool. Concerning his portrait work we have his daily schedule recorded as follows. Mr. Solomon paints about 8 portraits in the course of the year, as well as one important subject picture. As a rule he never wants more than 10 or 12 sittings, but each sitting usually lasts 3 hours. I always try to paint in the head at one sitting, Mr. Solomon tells me, and if I am not successful, I scrape it all out and begin again at the next sitting. I always consult ladies' own wishes as to attitude, dress, etc. They usually know how they look best. Once or twice, however, a pretty woman has come to me without a touch of the vanity that every pretty woman ought to have, and then I have been obliged to dictate how she is to dress and look and sit. Of course, with women who are not pretty different poses must be adopted. Much can be done by drapery, and a good deal will depend upon the chair. In some ways, Mr. Solomon considers, ladies can be best painted in their own homes. They are usually more natural and at greater ease there, in the midst of their accustomed surroundings. On the other hand, in a private house, there is usually considerable difficulty with the light, and for this reason Mr. Solomon prefers to paint all his portraits in his own studio. Only in exceptional circumstances, such as illness, has a lady sat to him in her own home. For the purpose of portrait painting, he remarks, it takes some time to get used to one's studio. Some painters always put the sitter in the same part of the room where they know exactly what effect the light will have, but I like to change the position of my sitter according to circumstances. Mrs. Patrick Campbell was painted by artificial light, I think. Beatrice Rose Stella Tanner, better known by her stage name Mrs. Patrick Campbell or Mrs. Pat, was an English stage actress, best known for appearing in plays by Shakespeare, Shaw, and Barrie. Yes, I was anxious to paint her just as I saw her on the stage in the part of Mrs. Tanqueray. The picture was the result of a sudden impulse on my part. I went to the theatre one evening to see the second Mrs. Tanqueray, and exclaimed to my companion, how I should like to paint Mrs. Campbell just as she is now. But I had no personal acquaintance with her, and probably nothing would have come of my remark if it had not happened to reach the ears of Mr. Pinheiro, who wrote and offered to arrange the matter. So I had a model stage built up at my other studio at St. John's Wood with footlights and the scenic properties. Mrs. Campbell was a splendid sitter, but was rather capricious in keeping her appointments, which is apt to be a failing with ladies, sometimes to the hindrance of a painter's other work, and the picture was finished rather hurriedly because Mr. Campbell, the poor fellow killed in South Africa, came home after an absence of 9 years, and there was naturally a second honeymoon. My portrait of Zangwill, by the way, was painted during the time Mrs. Patrick Campbell was giving me sittings. He would come in to see her, and when she had gone, I would start painting him. The portrait was thus painted entirely by gaslight, although I corrected faults of colour by daylight. The career of Solomon as a first-rate painter is evident, and he added writing to his achievements with a book for the aspiring artist, The Practice of Oil Painting and Drawing, which has been in continuous publication and popular among artists. His many other abilities are not mentioned here, but he remains an important figure in the art world, and his paintings are an inspiration for the art-loving public. We hope you enjoyed this presentation, and consider subscribing to future art discourses.